Imagine standing at the edge of the Nile Delta at dawn. The sun rises over fields of grain, fields that have sustained human life for thousands of years. Long before modern nations existed. Long before recorded memory. By the time these fields were harvested, the Great Pyramid was already ancient. To them, it was as distant as the Roman Colosseum is to us. Egypt was old beyond comprehension. But for the first time in its long biological memory, Egypt was no longer alone. It was part of something entirely new. A connected human system. A web of kingdoms stretching from the storm-lashed coasts of Britain. Across the Mediterranean. All the way to the mountains of Central Asia. Amber moved south from the Baltic. Ivory traveled north from Africa. Tin crossed deserts and seas from distant mines. Copper flowed from Cyprus. And bronze, humanity's first industrial metal, was forged from it all. Kings wrote to one another on clay tablets. They called each other brother. They exchanged gifts, arranged marriages, negotiated peace. This was not just civilization. It was synchronization. For the first time in history, human societies were biologically and economically interdependent. This was the Bronze Age at its peak. And within a single human lifetime, it collapsed. Cities burned. Empires vanished. Writing disappeared from entire regions, sometimes for centuries. When the smoke cleared, the world entered what we now call the First Dark Age. A collapse so complete that it took nearly 400 years for complex civilization to recover. At the center of this breakdown stood a shadowy presence. Groups of warriors who appeared suddenly, moved across the sea, and fought in ways no one had seen before. We call them the Sea Peoples. To understand why they mattered, we need to understand the system they shattered. Imagine your ancestors living in the 13th century BCE. Your family has traded by sea for generations. Ships crossing the Mediterranean are not remarkable, they are life itself. Then, in 1982, modern divers uncovered something extraordinary off the coast of Turkey. A shipwreck. Not debris. A frozen moment in time. The Ulubran ship. Its cargo told a stunning story. Copper from Cyprus. Tin from Central Asia. Glass from Mesopotamia. Amber from Northern Europe. Ivory from Africa. Gold jewelry. Even a wooden writing tablet once filled with wax. This was globalization. 3,000 years before modern industry. The Amarna letters reveal the same reality. Messages between rulers that read like modern diplomatic texts. Requests for grain. Complaints about bandits. Wedding congratulations. Strategic negotiations. This world was a network. And networks are fragile. Around 1200 BCE, the system began to fail. At first, the signals were subtle. A delayed shipment. A longer drought. An earthquake that damaged a palace but spared the kingdom. Then the data stacked up. Climate scientists now know the eastern Mediterranean entered a prolonged megadrought. Not one bad year. Not even one bad decade. Possibly 50 years of declining rainfall. Crops failed. Rivers shrank. Famine spread. Bronze Age societies depended on surplus. Extra food fed soldiers. Extra food supported artisans. Extra food sustained long-distance trade. Remove the surplus. And the entire structure destabilizes. Earthquakes compounded the damage. Seismic activity destroyed cities across Greece and Anatolia. Places that took centuries to build were lost in seconds. Then came the metal problem. Bronze requires copper and tin. Copper was common. Tin was not. Tin came from far away. Afghanistan. Possibly Cornwall. Only a few sources supplied the entire system. When trade routes failed, armies could no longer replace weapons. Military power collapsed from the inside. At the same time, iron began to spread. Early iron was inferior to bronze, but it was local. No global supply chain required. The monopoly was breaking. And into this unstable world moved people who could survive chaos. Seafarers. Mercenaries. Displaced populations. A Hittite text describes them simply. They live on their ships. They know the sea better than the land. Then came the moment Egypt could not ignore. During the reign of Ramses III, dark sails appeared on the horizon. Not raiders alone. Families. Wagons. Children. This was not a raid. It was a migration. At Medinet Habu, Ramses carved the encounter into stone. Naval battles. Hand-to-hand combat. Entire populations on the move. The inscriptions list their names. The Peleset. The Shurden. The Shikalesh. The Denyen. Different peoples, moving together. They fought differently. Bronze Age warfare was ritualized. Chariots. Elite nobles. Predictable formations. These warriors ignored the rules. They targeted horses. They used long slashing swords. They fought as fast-moving infantry. Chariots became death traps. Egypt survived, but barely. Others did not. The Hittite Empire vanished completely. Mycenaean palaces burned. Ugarit sent a final desperate message. Enemy ships sighted. Send help. The reply never came. Within 50 years, the Bronze Age system collapsed entirely. But here is the deeper question. Were the sea peoples the cause? Or the consequence? Imagine your crops have failed for years. Earthquakes have shattered your city. Trade has stopped. The king can't pay soldiers. And neighboring states are burning. You don't invade. You flee. Modern scholars increasingly see the sea peoples not as destroyers, but as displaced populations. Refugees who became warriors. Victims of systemic collapse. And now, for the first time, we can test this theory biologically. Ancient DNA has changed everything. At Ashkelon, archaeologists recovered human remains from before, during, and after the collapse. Scientists extracted genetic material spanning centuries. The earliest Iron Age individuals, linked to the Philistines, carried genetic markers uncommon in the Levant. Y chromosome lineages associated with southern Europe and the Aegean. Mitochondrial DNA tracing maternal ancestry to the western Mediterranean. These were not myths. They were biological signatures. But the real revelation came next. Within just a few generations, those European markers disappeared. Intermarriage dissolved them completely. The descendants of the sea peoples became genetically indistinguishable from local populations. They did not rule from enclaves. They integrated. Their DNA tells a story of movement, not conquest. Of absorption, not replacement. The sea peoples were not a single ethnicity. They were a coalition shaped by collapse. When the Bronze Age ended, the world entered darkness. Literacy vanished from Greece for centuries. Cities were abandoned. Population declined. Yet from the wreckage, new systems emerged. The Phoenicians rebuilt maritime trade. They created the alphabet. Greek city-states eventually arose. Iron democratized technology. The collapse broke old monopolies, and made room for new civilizations. So what really happened? The sea peoples were neither heroes nor villains. They were human beings caught in systemic failure. And their DNA reminds us of something profound. Civilization is not permanent. Progress is not guaranteed. And history, like genetics, is shaped as much by collapse as by continuity. Thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe to our channel.